So hello there everybody, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to build this responsive sidebar. And if you remember, in the previous video I showed you how to make a sidebar like this. This is basically the sidebar that Twitter has, and now let's make a responsive version of this. If you were to go on a mobile view, this is how it looks like. Looks terrible. All right, so coming back to our code, let's hide this one. First off, we need a few components from shadcn UI. The first component we'll need is the sheet, and if I were to just show you a demo, this is how it looks like. This is basically the sheet, and this will be our sidebar. And the next component we will need is the drawer, because I'll explain, but basically the drawer is just something that opens up from the bottom to the top, so we can use the drawer in place of the popover. So if you look at this popover on mobile phone, I don't think this is the appropriate thing to show. So instead of the popover, we are going to use the drawer. So let's go ahead and add this. I'm going to open up a new terminal over here, and I'm going to say pnpm.dlx shadcn UI add, and let's add the sheet and the sheet and the drawer. Once these components are added, let's go inside of the sidebar.tsx, this component that we had previously, which, if I were to give a recap, we just created a sidebar items that includes this array called links, that includes all these links and icons. Then we had extras, which is basically the other two links. This is the button and this is the other button. And so this is going to be as it is. We are not going to touch this. So first of all, let's do sort of a toggle between sidebar desktop and mobile. And for that, we will use a custom hook called use media query. And for that, we will need a package. Now there is a wonderful package called use hooks-ts. This includes a lot of useful custom hooks that we can import and use directly. So let's install this use hooks-ts package or library. And what we can do is we can just go ahead and import something from use hooks-ts. And yeah, so we will need the use media query hook, as simple as that. Now what we can do is we can go to the sidebar component itself, and we can say const let's say const is desktop, and we can say equals to use media query with the min width, and we can set that min width to 640 pixels. This is what I finalized upon after a lot of trial and error. So this is not exactly desktop, this may be tablet as well, and if you want to change it, you can go ahead and change it. Now what this hook basically does is it will take a look at this media query that, if you remember, in CSS we use media queries for responsiveness. So it will look at this media query and it will return to us a boolean. Now if we are on the desktop version, we want to return this desktop sidebar. As simple as that. We can just say if is desktop, then we just return the sidebar desktop. Now what else? If we are on the mobile version, what do we do now? So for now, I'm just going to return a div, and I'm just going to call this I'm just going to say mobile. That's all I'm going to say. And we go back. This is how it looks like, no problem. And when we switch to this view, you see we got mobile over here. We don't have the sidebar anymore, but we have the mobile. So some progress made. Moving on, let's work on the sidebar mobile component. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new component. I'm going to call this sidebar dash mobile.tsx, and it is going to have similarities with sidebar desktop. So first off, this is going to be a client component because we are going to use this use path name that we used in the desktop version as well. So let's just say use client, and let's just say export function sidebar mobile, as simple as that. Let's return. Now similar to the desktop version, it's going to also take in some props for we'll need the sidebar items, of course. So let's go ahead and copy this interface, and we're going to paste this interface. So it's going to be sidebar items, and we're going to import them, of course. So let's rename this to sidebar mobile props, and let's just say props is going to be sidebar mobile props, as simple as that. Now let's work on the return statement. So now this whole thing is going to be in a sheet component. So we can use sheet, and we can import it from UI sheet. So let's go ahead and say sheet. Then we need the sheet trigger, and this is going to be a button component. So let's just say button like this. We import the button component. I'm just going to say open sidebar for now. And because we are using a button component inside of the sheet trigger, we'll need to make this as child, right? So we put the as child. So now everything will work just fine. Once we have sheet trigger, let's have sheet content. All right, and I'm just going to say sidebar content for now. Hit save. Now let's go ahead and go to the sidebar component, the parent component, and in here we are going to return the sidebar mobile. That will auto import it, and the sidebar items is equal to sidebar items, as simple as that. And actually let's just put this into curly braces so that it's better on this view. So while editing the video, I realized that there was a little fault in the code. If you look at the code right over here, it's actually fairly straightforward. You have is desktop, which has used media query, and if it's desktop, then you show the desktop sidebar, else you show the mobile sidebar. Okay, that's very straightforward and it should work. But Next.js is a server-side rendering framework, so it renders every React code on the server. Now that applies the same for client components. Because this component is a client component, it should be rendered on the client, but it's not rendered on the client, it's actually hydrated on the client. So what actually happens is this code is being run on the server as well, and on the client side it is being hydrated. So it's sort of rerun, not exactly, but it's sort of rerun the code, whatever the is desktop and media query stuff is. So when you go ahead and refresh the page, right, this is the development server. When you refresh the page, you'll see we get the sidebar button right over here in the top left for a split second, and then we get this, and then we get 3 errors in the bottom left, and it says hydration failed because the initial UI does not match what was rendered on the server. Now this is one of those hydration errors in Next.js where you have a certain stuff that is rendered on the server and some stuff is rendered on the client, so they don't match, and that's why it throws you the error, because the server rendered HTML is different from the client HTML. So on the server side we get sidebar mobile, and then on the client side it changes to sidebar desktop. So how do we fix it? Well, because we are using the use media query hook from usehooks-ts, I went to the docs and let's just go to the documentation, and we have use media query. What I realized is that it has these options, and these options have and there are two options actually: default value and initialized with value. Now, if you read here, if true, which is the default value, if true, if you set this to true, the hook will initialize reading the media query, so it will start reading the media query right away. In SSR you should set it to false, returning options.default value or false initially. The default is true. So in short, what you have to do is go over here to this hook and add a comma after the first argument, and add an object and just say initialize with value should be false. This basically allows you to fix those hydration errors in server-side rendering, because we are using Next.js. If you are using plain React, then you don't need to do this. Now if we go back and we refresh, you see we get that for a split second. Of course we do, that's the normal behavior. But after the media query is run, this appears and we no longer get those hydration errors. Alright, so we got a button with the text of open sidebar. When I click on it, you see the sheet opens up from the right. Now we need to make some changes, of course. We want the sheet to open from the left and not the right. What we can do in that case is go ahead onto the sheet content, and let's say the side is going to be left. Right, hit save, you click on it, it opens up from the left. Perfect. Now one other thing I want is I want my custom close button. I don't want this little close button, I don't want this small close button. I want to keep my own close button, but unfortunately we don't have any way to say that, hey, I don't want to have this close button. So what you can do is go to the sheet content itself, and this is the power of shadcn UI, is that you can literally customize everything over here. So you can go to the sheet content, right, and you can simply add a prop. So I'm just going to call this prop hide close. Right, now it says it does not exist on the type, so let's go to the sheet content props right over here in this interface, and let's just say hide close is going to be an optional boolean. So we can choose not to pass it as well, right? So it's optional, so it will be undefined. If not passed in, that means false, right? A falsy value. So we got hide close, right? This is an optional boolean, it's a boolean or undefined. So what you can do is, you see this sheet primitive dot close, we can just go ahead and say if not hide close, right? If the user passes it as false or it's just not passed in, then only we show this close button. So I'm just going to cut this out and put it right over here. What we essentially did is we take another prop, right? We make it optional so it can be skipped. And if the user passes in hide close, meaning we just want to hide this close button, right? If the user passes in hide close, this condition goes false and this does not render. I'll explain. So right now we don't have hide close over here, and you see we have this close button, right? We just want to hide this close button. We added the prop over here, and what we can do is go to the sheet content and say hide close, hit save. You see the button is gone. So now we click outside to close it, but we are going to have our custom button as well. All right, now let's work on the main content. So I'm just going to take this out. Let's take this out, sidebar content, and I'm going to say the sheet header is the thing we need, right? In the sheet header, we are going to have the title, which is Twitter, and then the close button. So let's just say in the class name, let's say flex, right? And then we need flex row, which will basically have a flex direction of row. Then we need justify between, then we need item center, that will just have space in between these items, and that's it. Let's just go ahead and add a span tag, and I'm going to say Twitter right over here. So this will be basically our header. Let's just add some styles. So let's say class name, text LG, font semi bold, text foreground for the color foreground, and margin x3, so that will have a little bit margin from the left and right. Hit save. Let's take a look at it. Open sidebar. You see Twitter, it looks perfect, but there is a lot of padding. You see there is a lot of padding on the sheet itself. So we can go over to the sheet content and let's add some class name, and we can just say, well, hey, I want the px to be 3, so padding on the x-axis to just be 3, and py to be 4. So on the y-axis it should be 4. Hit save. You see now it looks a lot better. We have more control over the spacing inside rather than outside. Once we have this Twitter text set up, now we need the close button, which is very straightforward. We just have the button component, and inside the button component I'm going to have the X icon. So now this X comes from Lucid React right over here, X from Lucid React. So just say X, and let's set the size to 15. Yeah, let's just take a look at it. So this is how it looks like. Not good, of course. Let's set the variant to ghost. That's the first step. And then let's go ahead and set the class name. Height should be 7, width should be 7, and padding should be 0. Hit save. You see now it looks a little better, but you see these are not aligned properly. If you look closely, you will notice that there is some spacing on the top, and that's because of some spacing applied on the sheet header by default. What we can do is we can just say space y0, right? Hit save. You see now every spacing that we had previously is gone. So now everything is perfectly aligned. But when we click it, it does not close. Well, that's a simple solution. We can just use the sheet close component, right? Sheet close, and wrap this button inside of sheet close. And the only thing we need to do is as child, because we're using a custom button component. Hit save, and let's click on this. The sheet closes like magic, as simple as that. Now this open sidebar looks ridiculous to me, so let's just go ahead and have a good trigger. Now first off, we don't want any text over here. We want a menu icon, so we can import menu from Lucid React. The size is going to be 20 for the menu. Hit save. This is how it looks like. Not perfect. We're going to fix it. The size of this button is going to be icon. Hit save. That's how it looks like. The variant will be ghost. Again, that looks better, but it's sticky right over here. You see it's stuck on the top left with no spacing, with no margin. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to set let's just set the class name to be fixed, right? So this button this little button is going to be fixed, and we're going to fix it to the top left. So what we do is we say top 3 left 3, so it will be 3 units away from the top and 3 units away from the left, and hit save. You see now it looks a little bit better. So when I click on it, it opens up, and that's how a sidebar should look like. Also, we don't want all this spacing. we added all of this margin when we were in the desktop view, but it is also in the mobile view. So let's go over to the layout.tsx file where we added this margin left 300 pixels. Turns out we don't want it every time. We only want it after the small screens, right? So we can just add this SM breakpoint, hit save. You see now the margin is gone, but if you were to go to the desktop view, it is over here, which is perfect, but it still overlaps with the button. So what we can do is we can first of all say mx5, so margin on the x axis should be 5, and then we need to move the content down a little bit. So we have mt3, instead let's just say mt6, that moves it down a little bit, or let's just keep it 3, and we're going to say 3 is going to be for the desktop. So after the small breakpoint, desktop comes. So margin top 3 will be for the small, for the larger screen sizes. And other than that, on mobile, we're going to have margin top 16. So now this looks a lot better. All right, that's a lot of responsiveness. Now let's work on the actual sidebar content. So after the sheet header is done, let's just collapse it. After the sheet header is done, let's create a div and then another div inside of that. Now this is where we're going to have all of our sidebar items, or sorry, sidebar links. So let's say props dot sidebar items dot links dot map. So we get access to each link, and we have the index, of course. Now we are going to use the link component from next/link. Again, let me show you this import link from next link. Make sure to import that one only, and it's going to have a key props. Let's say key is going to be index, and href is going to be link.href. All right, and we have the link component. Now let's have the sidebar button that we also used in the sidebar desktop. So we have sidebar button, and you know what, I'm just going to go back to the desktop and I'm going to copy this sidebar button, so we don't need to rewrite all of it. Copy and paste. So all right, it asks for the path name, which is again as simple as having just const path name equals to use path name. Now use path name comes from next/navigation. Again, remember that. So we have if the path name, if this link is active, we highlight this, hit save, and let's just click on this. So we got all of these links. Perfect. Now they are stuck all together. So let's add some styles. First off, let's start with this div. I'm just going to add some class name. First off, there will be margin top of 5. Then we can have flex column, a width of full, and a gap of 1. So now all of them have some gap in between. Also on this div, let's just set class name of height to be full. So now we can put anything we want. We also want things at the bottom. And when I click on any of these, it works just fine. But there is one little problem. You see, when I click on any of the links, it redirects me to that page. You see, this is the messages page. If I click on list, this is the lists page, but the sidebar does not close, and the sidebar needs to close when I click on any of the links. For that, what we can do is we can just go ahead or go over to the sidebar button over here in this component right over here, and we can export another function. So let's say export function sidebar button sheet. All right, now this is again going to take in props, which will be the same as these props, like all of these. So we are just going to take in the default props, nothing else. We're just going to return the sheet close component, right? If you remember, I showed you the sheet close component over here when we implement the close button, and it's just going to have the sidebar button in here, and all of the props that we get will be passed in over here. As simple as that. Now again, we are using another component in here, so we need to use as child on the sheet close. Now instead of importing this component, let's import this component. So let's go to the top. We have the sidebar button, so instead we need the sidebar button sheet, and let's just say as sidebar button. So the code looks a lot more similar. So now this has a sheet close on top of it. So when I click on any of this, you see the sheet or the sidebar closes. Perfect. Moving on to the next part, we also need the extras, which were the last two buttons that we had. So what we can do is you can just go back to the sidebar desktop, and we just had extras like this. So let's copy that and paste it right over here. Hit save. You see, That's how it works. We just have more and tweet, and we don't want the sidebar to close over here. If you want, you can implement that, but these are only for the show. Now we want the bottom part. So if I were to expand this, you see this little popover and stuff. Let's add this. All right, so once we are done with this div, let's just collapse it. Now after this is done, let's create another div for the bottom part, and because we want it at the very bottom, what we can do is we can position this absolute. Yes, you heard that right, position absolute. We can set the width to full. Let's say the bottom, let's set that to 12, right? So it will be a little away from the bottom. The padding X will be 1, and let's set the left to 0, and let's just add anything, content, doesn't really matter. You see, this is at the very bottom. Perfect. Now first of all, what we want is a little separator. So let's just go right over here and let's use the separator component, and we can set the class name. Let's say class name. Again, this is also going to be absolute. Let's just set it to absolute, and let me show you how it looks like. This is how it looks like, but we want it a little more upwards, so we can set minus top to 3, right? So it will move the separator a little up. Then we need the left to be 0 as well. The separator is a little longer, so we set left to 0, and finally width should be full. So this is our separator. Now it's very subtle. Now let's add the drawer. So just like we added the popover, right, in the separator, after the separator in the desktop version, just like we added the popover, we need the drawer, right? That's the only difference. So I'm just going to copy all of this popover stuff, go back over here and just paste it right over here. Now we need to import all of these things. So let's just, instead of popover, I'm going to say drawer, right? So instead of importing drawer from wall, let's import drawer. Then we need the drawer trigger, right? Let's just import it properly, and this part is going to be the same avatar. Let's just import that stuff. All right, this again more horizontal. This icon is going to be imported, and instead of popover content, this is going to be drawer content. The icon settings, so let's just import settings. Let's import logout, and that looks just right. Let's hit save, and you see we have this little thing over here. When I click on it, this is how it looks like. Not perfect, of course, because we have the styles of the popover. So coming to the drawer content, we don't need a lot of this stuff. So we don't need the width to be 56. We don't need it to be rounded. We just need the padding to be 2. Hit save. And this is how it looks like, a lot better than before. So when I click on it, this is how it looks like on mobile devices. We can also improve this part a little bit. So instead of having just space y1, we can say flex call. We can say space y2, and we can add some margin top of 2, right? So now it's a little bit more spaced out, and I think I moved everything a lot more upwards. So let's just go ahead and set this bottom to be maybe 10 or a little less. Let's just say 7, 5, 6, 4. Yeah, this looks a lot better. So now if I were to go to the, if I were to click on it, this is how the drawer opens up. And if I were to close this and let's go to the full screen, this is our sidebar. Now again, I'm going to show you how it works on mobile actually. So let's go ahead and switch to the mobile view. All right, right, like this. And this is how the sidebar looks like. You open it up, you go to home page, you can go to any page you want. So because we are zoomed in 100%, we cannot see that button we added at the bottom. So let's switch to 75%, and now you can see this is how it looks like. If I were to go to, let's say, iPad Air maybe, and here we get the normal sidebar. If I switch to this phone, Samsung phone, you see this is how it looks like, and this is how it works. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, comment below what are your thoughts on this sidebar, and of course the code will be available on the GitHub repository. So that's it for this video. Take care. Bye bye.